Good Sunday morning and welcome to another edition of At Issue. I'm Corey Smith.
And I'm Sue O'Connell. Republican Senate candidate John Deaton is in the House, and he's going to join us in just a minute.
Of course, voting underway in Massachusetts as we speak. You can vote in person today, Sunday, in many communities. Secretary of State Bill Galvin is going to be here to talk about early mail-in voting, as well as the immense scrutiny that election officials are under due to all the misinformation out there.
And the top showcase for local black businesses is coming up in Boston later this week. We're going to look at the Mass Black Expo.
All right, over the past week, we got a closer look at the differences between the candidates in the race for the U.S. Senate in Massachusetts. Democratic incumbent Elizabeth Warren and Republican challenger John Deaton faced off in two debates. The
first debate, sponsored by WBZ-TV and the Boston Globe, featured some spirited exchanges on several top issues.
She is one of the most extremist people in the Senate.
We know what needs to be done. Rhetoric like this is not helping. We are potentially talking about the lives of our daughters and our granddaughters. And when that's on the line, we cannot trust John Deaton.
I'm a father of three daughters. I'm incapable of supporting a law that would restrict the freedoms. Senator Warren has been more critical of our ally Israel than she has Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran.
We need to push the parties, all of the parties, to the negotiating table to work out a lasting peace.
Daddy, I told you.
All right, so joining us in studio to talk about the Senate race is Republican John Deaton. Thanks for coming back on That Issue. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
All right, so you were here during primary season several months ago. Since that time, have you found that voters have a better sense of who you are and asking more about your policies rather than your background and biography?
Yeah, and I think the fact that in the primary I got 65% of the vote despite three people on the ballot, it was resonating with them. Once they learned who I am, my policies as a centrist, common sense person, I think, and nonpartisan at that, I think they're ready for that. I think they're ready for that kind of leadership.
We had Senator Warren on a few weeks ago. We asked her about your candidacy. This is what she had to say.
3 crypto billionaires recruited him out of Rhode Island to move to Massachusetts. And then they put $2.5 million into a super PAC to run ads so that he could get the nomination. The 2 Massachusetts Republicans who ran against him didn't have that kind of money. So he ends up winning the nomination, and now the crypto billionaires are hoping that they will be able to buy this seat.
So leading figures in the crypto industry have contributed to your campaign. Every time I post something about you or retweet something about you, I get overwhelmed on my X account by crypto pitches. I've actually had to mute them, which, if you know me, I rarely ever do. Is that a fair criticism?
Well, listen, she's talking about a super PAC that is more about her than it is me, because she's trying to ban an entire industry. Her bill bans the self-custody of Bitcoin in America, but they just granted permission to the big banks to custody crypto. And so the industry is more about her. She's earned their motivation. I can't help what happens to a super PAC. My personal campaign is not. I have small-time investors. The people that I think are inundating you, I sued the government, and I did it pro bono, and I won Lawyer of the Year, Consumer Advocate of the Year, and won the Defender of Freedom Award because I took on the SEC that was hurting small-time holders of crypto. And I won. A lifelong Democratic judge appointed by President Barack Obama said, I agree with John Deaton, cited my legal work, which was all done for free. It took me 3 years of pro bono work. And so I became a little bit of a folk hero to the crypto holders because I did all that for free. But the real question is, why is Senator Warren, when she announced her reelection, during the first debate, John Keller brought up the fact that when she announced her reelection, she announced that she was going to build an anti-crypto army. Why? We have the immigration issue, we have debt issue, we have opioid addictions, we have foreign wars, and the world's fallen in chaos, and inflation so bad here in Massachusetts. Why would our senior senator focus on crypto?
But to just play devil's advocate for a second, lots of people get concerned that in emerging new businesses, you know, if we look back on Facebook and we look back at what's happening with Instagram and we look at what's happening, they say that people in Congress don't react quickly enough. We know that they're working on wars. We know that they're working on all these things. Who else is looking out for crypto either way, like in a good way or a bad way? If Elizabeth Warren isn't doing it, who would be doing it?
I've been doing it. I did it.
Well, you're not elected yet.
I'm not.
saying for the, you know, to criticize her for taking it, you could disagree with what she's doing, but taking it on as an issue. Shouldn't they be doing that?
Well, yes. And what I was meant to say to you is that if you look at what I've done, I've been calling for regulation. I'm not anti-regulation. We're applying 1930s law to artificial intelligence and blockchain technology. Senator Warren's approach, though, is to ban it. You don't ban it. You know, there's been less than 1% of crypto's been used for illicit purposes. Hamas actually issued a directive, don't use crypto because it's so traceable. You know, ATM machines have been used in a bad way for drug deals. You don't ban the technology. And so her approach is just too extreme. But I believe in smart, tailored regulations. If the Congress would have done its job and given some guidance on this new technology, the FTX thing would have never happened because people were going overseas to these offshore exchanges. But I believe in stablecoin legislation. I believe in making sure that we have audits of these exchanges. And I believe that customer funds should always be segregated from the centralized entities funds. So I just want the viewers and everyone to know, I do support regulating this industry. It's the one thing that's held it back.
So if you were to look at Sue's X feed, you would forgive her for thinking that some of these folks are single-issue voters and it's just the crypto issue. Yeah. How do you translate your stance on crypto and your role in this sort of emerging field to other issues like immigration, like security and climate change and things like that? How do you talk to those voters who love you for the crypto stuff but may not know what your other policies are?
Well, that's been the challenge because, unfortunately, crypto has taken way too much of time and energy. Because if you were to ask everyday people here in the Commonwealth to name the top 10 issues, I assure you crypto's not one of them. And so I agree with that. The problem is we live in such a divisive world. My biggest challenge is that I'm a Republican in Massachusetts who doesn't support Donald Trump. And so I've offended some Republicans with my stance, and it's getting the voters that are Democrats and the moderates to see who I am. It's just a name issue. We did some polling that showed that if they don't know anything about me, I lose by 20, 25 points. Let's just be honest. When they learn that I'm pro-choice and I'm a veteran, it's a single-digit race. And then when they really get to know me, I'm having lifelong Democrats say, you know what? This guy's safe. This guy's a good guy. He's in it for the right reasons. I can trust him, unlike what Senator Warren's saying.
All right, so I've been watching a lot of Kamala Harris, talking with a lot of Republicans. The Cheneys are behind her. A lot of guys with phones that they wear on their clip to their belts are with her. There's a lot of Pryor, Romney, Bush, all sorts of Republicans are voting for her. Are you going to vote for Kamala Harris?
No.
Who are you going to vote for?
I'm going to write in a name. I'll tell you why. And it's interesting, Vice President Harris, if you look at her policies, they're more in line with me than Senator Warren's, including on crypto. She wants to do a reset on crypto, for example. But I voted for Joe Biden last time. And it's because he promised that he would go from the center. He even bragged that he had worked with white segregationists. He could work with anyone. He would unite this country. And that didn't happen. And I see Vice President Harris right now doing the same playbook, going to the center, promising it. And so, I was fooled the first time. And what I'm saying is, to me, it doesn't matter. I know it matters to most people. Right? To me, I'm going to have one test. Is it good for Massachusetts and America? Sue, if it's good for Massachusetts and America, they could call it liberal. Corey, they could call it conservative. I don't care. I'll vote for it. If it's not, I won't. And I think that's what we got to get back to.
So square that circle for us. If your views you feel are closer to Kamala Harris, why not just pull the lever for her? Why not vote for her?
Because it's an election year, and she's doing the same playbook that Joe Biden did, which is to say we're going to just go to the center now. And I just got fooled first time. I think that we have to answer this question in this country, and I tried to do it on the debate stage, as you know, which is, why is this election even a toss-up? Why did 74 million Americans vote for Donald Trump the first time, despite everything we know? They're not all racist xenophobes. We can't take that position. These are good people who believe the country's heading in the wrong direction. We need leaders to say why. Senator Warren was asked that question. Why is he so popular? Why is this race even close? She threw her hands up in disgust and said, I just don't get it. Well, I think it's your job to get it. You know, you can't indict half of America. You know, we got to get back to being able to say, let's say Sue and I disagree with the president. We got to be able to get back to say, I disagree with who you're voting for president, but I don't disagree with you. You know?
You get elected, what are the top 3 issues at the end of your first term that we'll say you worked on?
It'll be a term limit bill, it'll be the codification of Roe versus Wade, and it'll be trying to force government to talk about balanced budgets once again in this country. And the fourth one would be pro-innovation. We got to get regulatory clarity to artificial intelligence, automation, robotics, blockchain technology. We have to make sure we're the leader moving forward when it comes to innovation, including renewable energy.
If you win, will you be John Deaton, the Republican senator from Massachusetts, or could we see John Deaton, the independent senator from Massachusetts?
Well, you know, I upset a lot of people in the Republican Party recently because Senator Warren was out there saying if you elect John Deaton, it breathes life into a federal abortion ban. And I said that in a 50-50 Senate, I could stop that from happening because I would look at the leadership and say, you put that ban on the floor and I'll switch to a Democrat the next day and we'll flip this Senate back. And I got a lot of criticism. And, you know, Senator Warren thinks I'm pretending. And I think that says a lot, that we live in a world where a brilliant politician like her has become so jaded that she thinks I'm on a debate stage lying that I'm going to, when I say I would never betray my daughters, that I'm going to then go to the Senate and say, no, psych, I was joking. That's just unbelievable, and it's tragically sad. And so I will have an independent voice in the Senate and actually give the Senate, Massachusetts, a real voice again, because Senator Warren's vote is taken for granted. If it's being pushed by the Democratic leadership, she's in. I'm not. And a Republican, I'm a maybe. And I'm going to ask questions like, what's this? How's it good for Massachusetts? How's it good for America? And I'll be sort of the Joe Manchin, if you will, of West Virginia. He was the most important senator because of that independent streak, and I bring that to Massachusetts.
All right. We will have to see what happens. John, thank you for coming back. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
Good luck on the rest of the remaining days and weeks of the campaign. We
Thank
appreciate
you very
it.
much.
All right. Up next, our election voting 411 with Secretary of State Bill Galvin.
All right, you got your mail-in vote, but aren't you confident that the Post Service is going to get it there, or are you thinking about voting early? Where do you go? He's going to join us and tell us. Stay with us.
Plus, the CEO of the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts is here to talk about the Mass Black Expo and how you can take part. Stay with us. Welcome back to At Issue. On this Sunday, many communities, including Boston, Cambridge, Lowell, Quincy, Worcester, you can vote in person thanks to Massachusetts' early voting program.
And of course, you can vote by mail and drop your ballot off at a post office or your local election office. And joining us to talk about early voting and some important deadlines is Massachusetts Secretary of State Bill Galvin. Welcome.
Great to be with you.
I know you're just a little bit busy,
busy.
this time of year. Want to make sure folks get the most important information right off the top. Let's talk about a lot of deadlines that are out there. We mentioned early in-person voting underway right now. What are some of those early in-person deadlines that folks need to be aware of, especially when does early voting stop?
Well, early in-person started yesterday, Saturday, in some communities. They all are required to have at least one weekend day, and some have chosen Sunday as opposed to Saturday. You want to check with our website, votinma.com, and you'll get your community's exact hours and locations. It depends on the size of the community. In the larger communities, they've had both days. The period will continue till November 1st, and again, the hours and locations do vary. Early in person is, of course, the opportunity to vote as if you were voting on election day and give your completed ballot back to election officials. So you don't have to worry about transport, you don't have to worry about the mails, you don't have to worry about any of those other things. And needless to say, the expectation is the crowds will be less. That period, again, ends on November 1st. Early by mail continues. Now, we have in the hands of voters over 1.3 million ballots already, and we're seeing them come back now, which is encouraging. Obviously, the concerns are how do they get back? Well, needless to say, we've been working closely with the post office. We're trying to make sure that they prioritize election mail, and we believe they're going to try to do that, and we're hopeful for that. But having said that, we are recommending that if it gets down to 7 days, that you not use the mails. The Postal Service cannot guarantee delivery. And the other issue is this, that it needs to be postmarked, and we don't know if it's going to be postmarked. So if it gets down to that 7-day period, we're suggesting you use the community drop box or take the ballot to the local election office. You can't take it into the polls on election day. That you can't do. Mm-hmm. But if you want to get it back, that's the way to do it, or take it for a relative to the drop box, or take it to the local election office. Again, vote by mail is very successful. We've had 1.3 already delivered to voters. We've had a very successful experience in the 22 election and the 20 election. So we've perfected it. I hate to use, I'll take that word back, perfected. We've improved it, and we have. But the reality is that it's a very large operation, and we want to make sure everybody's vote gets to count.
We were just talking about voting by mail. What if I want to vote by mail on Election Day? What would you suggest I do?
Well, I'd suggest you don't. I mean, for starters, if it's down to Election Day, you'd have to, first of all, make sure that if you're using the U.S. mails, it would have to be postmarked by the election day. So the only way to be assured of that will be to take it into a post office and have it hand canceled. But even then, it would have to be delivered to the local election office if you're voting in Massachusetts by 3 days, or November 8th. So we're suggesting the better option, if you get down to that point, unless it's a really impossible situation, is to vote in person if you're down to Election Day. Again, early in-person sessions will continue to November 1st, so there are many opportunities to vote.
I can't promote your website enough. I use it all the time. There's copies of your ballots there so you can prepare.
There's also a way of tracking your ballot. If
Right.
you have used the mails to track your ballot, you should do that.
And there's a voter guide there for
Yes.
folks if they need more information about who they're voting for and what the ballot questions
Right.
are. If folks aren't registered to vote right now, what are those deadlines? And can
October
they do it?
26th.
And they can do it through the website?
They can do it through the website. Again, it may depend upon their relationship with the Registry of Motor Vehicles, depending upon that. They can also, there will be sessions right up to that date at the local election offices. If they have any doubt, they should go down and verify their registration. Now, our registration laws, again, have been very inclusive. So we have automatic voter registration. Many people are registering through that, even though they're not participating in the registration process. But if they've moved, they should check on their registration. Every election that's like this, presidential election, we have thousands of people who come out trying to vote in an old address, and they can't. And they have to get a provisional ballot, and it oftentimes ends up not being counted. You know, we've spent all day trying to verify whether they were registered or not, and we can't.
Can you explain to people what a provisional ballot is?
Under federal law, it's a federal election, of course. You cannot be turned away without being given a ballot. Whether it'll be counted is another question, hence provisional. So it preserves your right to vote. You may recall the long-distance history of Florida in 2000. A lot of people were turned away.
Me, Secretary.
Well, I can talk about it a lot, but I'm not going to. What I'm going to say is this. As a result of that and the changes made after that, everyone is offered a provisional ballot which preserves your right to vote if your vote can be counted. Now, very often provisional ballots are not counted. If you're not registered in Massachusetts, you're not going to be counted. So you need to register first, and that's the best thing you can do is check your registration now. There's enough time, and fix it if you need to, if you want to vote.
This obviously not your first election, but times are a little different. They have been since 2020. What are you seeing out there within not just your office, but around Massachusetts? We're hearing a lot of talk about threats to election offices, threats to poll workers. What are you seeing?
Well, fortunately, we haven't had threats of physical violence, and we don't want that, of course. And we will make sure that doesn't happen with adequate police protection and security. What we are seeing is, in some places, a heightened suspicion of election operations. People want to take videos, activities that suggest suspicions, which are unfounded. You know, we have a very transparent system. First of all, in Massachusetts, we only have paper ballots. I've always made sure that nothing else but paper ballots could be used here. And if you were really, we have very liberal recount laws. You don't have to say, well, I think this happened or that happened. If you want to get the signatures, which is a very limited number, 10 per precinct, or 10 per ward in some cases, you can get a recount. So we see, especially in local elections, there are often recounts when voters have the opportunity to look at the ballots, or the candidates to look at the ballots. So we've tried to make it as transparent as possible. In addition to the paper ballot, the voter, as you know, gets to put the ballot in the box themselves, and that ballot is preserved. So if there's a question, it's counted automatically first, but if there's a question, they can be hand counted. So I think we have a pretty transparent process. So I don't think the suspicions are justified, but they do exist, and we try to responsibly refute them.
Massachusetts Secretary of State Bill Galvin, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your service. We wish you well in the days ahead.
Thank you.
All right, we want to turn to a big event coming to Boston, and it's getting started this coming Friday. The Mass Black Expo. It's hosted by the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts. It's a two-day event at the Boston Exhibition and Convention Center in Seaport, and it kicks off Friday. The Boston stations of NBC and Telemundo are media partners for the event. And joining us here at the table to talk about the focus of the expo is Nicole Obi. Nicole serves as CEO of the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts. Thank you so much for taking the time and being here.
Thank you for having me.
Nicole, for folks who may not know, what is the Black Economic Council?
Well, BECMA, as we go by, is an organization that was formed in reaction to the 2015 Color Wealth study by the Boston Fed that found that the median net worth of Black Boston households was $8 compared to white Boston households. A set of business leaders came together, created this organization to focus on building Black wealth.
What kind of growth has the organization seen since you started?
Well, for the last 9 years, we've grown quite a bit in the areas of policy and advocacy, which we do at the municipal, state, and federal level. We also do programming around building Black wealth, mostly for business owners. And since I took over leadership of the organization in 22, we've supported over 700 Black-owned firms.
So the focus of the expo is building Black wealth. What can folks expect? Who can we expect to hear from and see at the expo?
Sure, we're really excited. This is our 6th annual Mass Black Expo, and we'll be having speaker panels, so we'll have 12 of those. We'll also be having experiences like electric vehicle test drives. We'll have headshots. We'll have a lot of opportunities for networking, and we'll have dozens of Black firms and our allies that are going to be exhibiting. Some of our speakers include the Fed President, Susan Collins, as we approach the 10-year anniversary of that Color of Wealth study and then BECMA's birth. She's going to be coming in and sharing what's going on now in the Commonwealth and what we can expect as we move forward. We'll also be having Senators Markey and Senator Liz Miranda giving their political insights on what they're doing around building Black wealth. And we'll also have a guest speaker, Pinky Cole Hayes, who's an influencer and an entrepreneur that'll be sharing what she's learned in her journey to building wealth.
For folks who want to attend the expo, where can they go? Where can they sign up?
They can sign up at massblackexpo.com, or they can also check us out on becma.org, and that'll lead us to the same site.
All right, one more question, in 30 seconds if you can. We know Boston has a reputation, right? Some folks say it's well earned. Some folks say not the city that I know. From a Black business standpoint, what is it like being an entrepreneur, a Black business person in Boston, and how do you improve it?
It's a great question. I would say that it's still really tough as a Black entrepreneur. We have the most difficulty in gaining adequate access to affordable capital, more so than any other entrepreneurs in this space. But there are definitely green shoots, right? So we have a mayor in the city of Boston who's a young woman of color. We have the governor, and there are new policies and practices that are in place. And organizations like BECMA and others that we work with are working every day to make progress. And now is the time, especially because Massachusetts is at an inflection point where if we don't do something different, we're going to lose lose our stature in the country and in the world as leaders, and we have to be more inclusive and more productive, and that's what we're here for.
All right, Nicole Obi, thank you so much for joining us. Again, the Mass Black Expo going on Friday and Saturday at the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center. Have fun.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, that is going to do it for this edition of At Issue. Join us next Sunday when Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley is here to talk about a number of issues, including her voter outreach on behalf of Vice President Harris's campaign. That's going to do it for this edition. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Corey Smith.
And I'm Sue O'Connell. Have a great day.